Hello! Today we're doing Buddhish, the section of the show where we don't necessarily talk about Buddhism. Here's Docs as usual. Nick, you're here as well.
Hey, everybody.
And this time we have a guest. Friend, please introduce yourself.
I am Ambrose. I am a root worker. I've been practicing since about the beginning of the pandemic. I guess before then I've been practicing unknowingly, which is actually common with root workers, with Black folks in general.
Cool. Well, glad to have you here. We have really been wanting more guests on this show for a while, so thank you for coming.
We really appreciate having you here.
All right, so it's not when we're recording this, we're a little early for that, but when this episode goes up, it is going to be Friday the 13th in October, and it's in October with an eclipse and a blood moon, I think. Like, this is going to be, like, if there were a season that were going to be particularly spooky, it's going to be this year, I think. And so with that, we wanted to talk a bit about some stuff that's kind of Halloween related. So, Ambrose, what do you want to talk about with us today?
Well, I'm going to actually start with the word spooky because that's words actually still used to describe Black folks. The word spook is actually a slur against Black folks, dark-skinned folks.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I use the word spoopy.
Spoopy, okay.
Spoopy because like it's still goofy, it's still fun. But or if I'm trying to be serious, of course, I'll use unnerving, I'll use creepy, I'll use just alternatives because in some parts of the world, you'll hear folks in Australia and New Zealand will still use the word spook to describe dark-skinned folks. So I steer away from it.
Yeah, understandably. I will be doing so as well now that I actually know that.
Me too. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's not common knowledge here. And some people will even argue because they're like, well, I've never heard that. And it's like, yeah, because it's not still used here, but it was. And I keep it out of my vocabulary these days.
Yeah. Reasonable.
Spoopy is much more fun anyways.
It is.
I like to go with like creepy or, something like that for me. But I'm also like, I like the serious Halloween stuff, getting into like horror movies and the like. So, the more like goofy, I guess, the lighthearted aspect is that's not where I'm going most of the time, but I will not be using that word anymore. Sure.
Well, thank you. And then something that comes up a lot around this time of year is things like voodoo dolls. And I wanted to talk about that. And well, they're not just these cute little things, they're poppets. And poppets are something that's really important in hoodoo and voodoo and Santeria and all of the diaspora from West Africa and in the islands and in South America, and you even see them in like Turtle Island and in the indigenous cultures throughout the Americas, or so-called Americas. They are extremely important. They're not dolls. they're not meant to be these cutesy, like, oh, I got a little crochet voodoo doll and it's cute, and like, don't get me wrong, I think that they can be cute, but
I'm looking, I googled poppet from this, and yeah, but what's coming up is, like you said, crocheted, and like one of them even has a sales tag on it. So yeah, just a quick Google reveals you're correct.
Yeah, and they're very serious in like in the work that root workers do, and it's off-putting to see them be just made into little toys because they're actually extremely important. And I'm not going to get into all of the actual work that's done with them. That's not my place. I'm not a teacher. And it's just rude. It's extremely rude.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on like that for Black and Indigenous people, I suspect.
Yeah, and just seeing like the costumes in Spirit Halloween, like and other places that are like, oh, be a witch doctor and be all sorts of things. It's just like you know, the thing is that hoodoo, voodoo, santeria, and all of those, there's so many. They would not exist if it were not for colonization. They were born from the diaspora. They were born from us not being able to practice our religions and our spiritualities, such as in West Africa, we practice Yoruba. And I shouldn't say we because I'm not African, but that's what I guess that what we were practicing there until colonization happened. We were stolen, we were kidnapped, and forcibly brought over to Turtle Island and forced to practice Catholicism. And we hid our gods and our spirits in saints. And so then you get hoodoo.
Ah, okay.
We're pretty familiar on this show with the effects of colonization on East Asian religious practices. And so a lot of what you're telling us here, that's not surprising at all. You know, I've seen this plenty of times in my own studies of different peoples, and it's familiar, but unfortunate and unwelcome to hear the same story of colonization told over and over again in different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so to have our practices that were born from survival be made into costumes, be made into toys, be made into, oh, I'm going to dress up as this and it's going to be fun and I'm going to win costume contests and I'm going to make a profit by making these cute little things. It's unbelievably disrespectful. It literally is like bringing tears to my eyes because this is my history. This is my ancestors, like, literally bled over this. Some of them didn't survive over this. And, you know, now I have ancestors that guide me, but I shouldn't have as much ancestral trauma because of this, you know, like, and for folks to just be so casual about it, it's just disrespectful.
I've seen costumes like based on, you know, the costumes that you're talking about. Like, some of those are aesthetically really cool, but like it's not ours. Like, that's the thing, is it's like that's not for me. Like, I'm a white dude, so like, yeah, that is not my history to make a costume out of, even if it looks really cool. Like, that's a spot where I think a lot of Western folks fall over, is just that, you know, something looks cool, so let me do that. And like you said, that we really need to come up with something of our own instead. But you know.
It also reminds me of, especially in the Midwest, and also the East Coast to some extent as well. When I lived there, I saw a lot of costumes of Native Americans with big feather headdresses and such things. And there's even like an ongoing controversy at the university that I study at, the University of Illinois, about changing the mascot from the chief to the Illini, the Fighting Illini, and then changing it to something else. And this is going on with all kinds of different sports as well, like the Chicago Blackhawks and the Redskins and all this other stuff. All of these indigenous peoples and their culture and their religion and things that are critically important to their practice are being flattened and commodified and made into toys and trinkets for people who are descended from colonizers. And in doing so, it's insulting to the spirit and to the culture and to the people. And during all of these controversies about changing things back and forth, changing names back and forth to be politically correct or not, no one is really asking the native people themselves how they feel about it. I feel like there's a lot of conversations going on, especially at the University of Illinois, among wealthy white people about what the name should and should not be. And here's the native Ojibwe people of the region who are just still like under the fist of capitalism and colonialism and all of these other evil forces that are forcing them onto reservations and into poverty and into positions where their voice can't be heard. It's kind of sickening to think about.
Yeah, and the thing is I'm actually also indigenous. My people are the Homa and the Chata, and the Homa actually aren't federally recognized, for better or worse. And you said descended from colonizers, and it's not. It's still colonization. It's still
true.
colonistic behavior, because that kind of behavior is still rewarded today.
It is.
The thing is
Right.
that even me being light-skinned, I'm still rewarded for my light skin. I'm still experiencing things that people with darker skin don't get. I still get benefits. And that's something that I need to use as someone with light skin. I need to use my privilege in order to help people with darker skin. So we're still rewarded by capitalism, by colonization, and it's important to recognize that we are not simply descendants of colonizers. We are the colonizers still.
Absolutely.
And we need to use that privilege as much as possible. We need to milk the system that rewards us in order to help and twist it and bring it down from all sides, the inside, the outside, left, right, diagonal. But anyway, so
Revolution.
yes, viva la revolution. But you're right. It's these people in these boardrooms without a single person who it affects in the room with them, and talking about it in these very stale, what is the word I'm looking for? These very like distant, sort of almost theoretical, remote conversations of, oh, but they're just very removed from the situation because it does not directly affect them.
Yeah.
So it's very much almost like a more of a scientific standpoint to it, of like theory or hypothesis, not actual, okay, we're discussing real people, real consequences.
Their stake in it is just profit. It's just projected profit. And so they're so disconnected from the reality of not only the consumers themselves, but just the people who are affected by their decisions. And so, yeah, it is very remote and removed and very distant from reality.
Yeah, and again, it just that just ties back into these costumes, these little crochet poppets. It doesn't affect me except for what I can gain from it. I can win contests. I can make money off of my Etsy, and it's not that big a deal. Or on Facebook, I'm actually in a group. I'm help mod a group. That's not a dream catcher, but okay. And
yeah.
yeah. And we essentially just make fun of folks who make these garbage dream catchers, and none of them are actually Anishinaabe in any clan, any offer, and anything. They it's the audacity of these people. We try to educate them. We ask the question, are you indigenous? Are you native? Are you Ojibwe? Well, me and my mom used to make them when I was little, and they mean a lot to me. And or people get them tattooed, and it's like, well, no wonder your life is crap if you're catching all the bad things and they're stuck to your skin.
Yeah.
And it's just, we try so hard to educate. We try so hard to be gentle. We try to be like, hey, this is sacred. This is sacred. Please try something else. Call them wall hangings, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
They're just macrame wall hangings. Call them that. You don't have to call them dream catchers, honey, because they are literally not. You've got Disney ears on them. They've got little like crystals hanging off of them, and they've got little like, is that Stitch from Lilo and Stitch? Like,
no,
that's
God.
Dreamcatcher. Like, I swear to God, the amount of Disney dream, quote unquote, dream catchers there are, like, it's they're wall hangings. I could go on, but
yeah, that Facebook group sounds like it might be fun to lurk in, because like, yeah, I wish I didn't hate Facebook so much. I might join in, or well, lurk anyway. But yeah, it's really easy for white people in large portions of the United States to just not know any non-white people. It's very easy to just not know anything, and if you don't have any actual people to see, like, you know, the people who own this history that were appropriate, yeah, like it's just, it sucks. And another part of it is kind of going back to what I was talking about before about, you know, the costumes looking cool. The pattern on the wall hanging, like that thread pattern, that shape is interesting and cool looking, but, you know, that's not enough. Like, it's something being interesting and cool is, you know, that you can't just take it. That's somebody else's. That
you
feeling.
gotta ask the questions. You gotta be, what does it mean? Where does it come from? Like, you have to ask the questions, and these people don't ask the questions. They just look at it and go, I want that. I want to take that. I want to make that. And
Yep.
it's just, no, that is that colonizer mindset of, I'm going to take this and make it mine. And you can't do that. You need to come from a questioning place. You need to come from a place of sitting back and asking the questions. And that's what we try to encourage in these people. We try to be like, hey, we try so hard to be gentle when we see in any of these scenarios, with the poppets, with the dream catchers, with just any of this stuff. Just, hey, did you know that is appropriative? Hey, maybe you didn't know this. Hey, and these people get so defensive.
Yeah.
I've been doing this forever and it's never been a problem before. And it's like, well, maybe people were expecting you to be defensive and this is exactly what you're doing. Or maybe nobody else knew, or, you know, like you're saying, like, especially like in the Midwest, it's just a desert of knowledge because it's just so predominantly white. Or even if in spaces that aren't, there's a lot of folks that are people of color that were not raised having this knowledge because they were raised in these schools that don't have this information, because they're like, I mean, I didn't know a lot of this stuff until I left those schools and I was like free to go on the internet with all of my questions.
Yeah, the internet changes the game a lot. I'm very fortunate that through the internet mainly, I have met a lot of folks who are not cishet white men, and that's been very helpful. Like, if you don't have that point of contact with somebody who is not in that in group, like, you don't know. Like, and that's why, you know, you're talking about how gentle you're being with these criticisms. Like, there are people who are perfectly good-hearted about it and just ignorant. Like, Nick and I just in this recording learned about a new slur. we didn't know. I didn't know when I first started like looking up about it that, you know, what we call dream catchers are super not it. Like I started that because I was thinking of a game scenario, and it's like, I would like to add somebody who is like having a Native American flair. Maybe their like implement for their magic is a dream catcher. And so I was like, okay, let's see the history of dream catchers. Oh no.
It's a good thing you took that extra step, because most people don't. You know, you did exactly what Ambrose was saying and started with the I'm going to ask the question before I do the thing mindset. And you avoided having, like, whenever Ambrose was talking about the person who had a dream catcher tattooed on them, or the design tattooed on them, and their life was really bad because of it. It's like whenever people go and get Chinese characters tattooed on themselves, but they don't know any Chinese, and they end up getting like bowl of soup, you know, tattooed on themselves because they didn't even ask the question.
I remember at one point Ambrose and I were making fun of a picture of a white girl who had like the Egyptian guardians. I don't remember the correct term. It was an Egyptian symbol tattooed on her. It's like Ra. Yeah. Okay. Like, you know, I remember it's like
across
that,
her entire chest.
Yeah. And it's like, wow, if curses are real, you are cursed now. Because like, that's so wrong. But, you know, like I said, it's really easy to be ignorant about this stuff, at least in the United States and, you know, places that, I'm going to go ahead and say most rural places.
It's true, because that's the problem. That's where the lack of exposure really mainly is.
As soon as I moved to a proper city, it's like, oh, everyone is here. All of them. Like, it's all here. And like, even like, I live in Arkansas. I live near enough to Little Rock to go there fairly often. And like, Little Rock is fairly diverse in that there are Black and Hispanic people, but there are no Muslims. There are very few Jews in the area. There are few, like, not many Native American people anymore. Like, there's a lot of ways to just have blind spots, and getting into a city where everyone is together is just a life-changing, like, mind expansion moment. It's like, oh, we can make it together. Like, everybody's together, and like, there disagreements and conflicts, but we're making it work. So like, it is possible. It's just, you have to get out of
just sitting and asking the questions. If you're going to do something, ask the questions before you do it. Or if you've done it and someone approaches you, let them approach you. And if you feel yourself getting defensive, take a step back.
Yeah.
And if you need to take that step back, then voice that, hey, you know what? I feel myself kind of getting my hackles up. I need to take a step back. Or if it's online, just step away from your phone, from your computer, and just come back to the message later. Or if you are in person, just be like, look, I'm feeling myself kind of getting into a space where I'm going to react instead of respond. I need to take a breath. I want to have this conversation with you because clearly it's important to you. Just give me a minute, because clearly I've done something to upset you, and I do want to take this opportunity to speak with you, but let's just take a second and then listen, because especially if it's something that's cultural and it's not your culture, you better sit the fuck down, take several seats and listen.
White people are bad at that, though.
But they don't have to be.
We don't have to be. But like, the situation, like, talking about these, it's a cop-out for sure. But like, these conversations are uncomfortable. They're difficult. At the start of it, it feels really bad, because it's like, you know, from my point of view, is I'm looking up all, like, getting on the internet and actually learning some history, not what was taught in school. Like, some of the things they taught in school did happen, but they left out a whole lot of stuff too. And like, learning that history and being like, oh, these are my ancestors, I am connected to this. And that feeling in somebody who is like somebody who's trying to do it right. That feeling sucks.
Yeah, and I
But
get that. And
yeah,
also it's like you can get that sense of like, but you know what? I'm gonna do better than them.
yeah,
Fuck them.
that's the
Like,
correct
you know,
response.
like, yeah, that might be the legacy they left me, but I can do better just as much as like, especially folks that have kids, like I'm gonna do better than my parents and their parents and their parents. Like, I'm not gonna let it continue through me. People can do better and they don't need to take the cop out of, well, I'm white, so I'm bad at this. They, y'all can do better. It's just a matter of being like, you know what? I made a mistake and I admit to that, and show me how I can do better, especially if someone's coming to you with gentility. That takes a lot more than y'all understand. Like, I'm speaking to the audience here. Like, I mean, Docs, you and I have had great
Yeah,
conversations, and I appreciate how much you come to me with these questions. Like, I love our conversations because,
I'm glad to hear that.
oh, I love our talks because you come to me like, hey, like, it's so funny because you always come to me with, I don't want to do the stupid white thing.
Mm-hmm.
So can we, when you have the space and energy to do this, let me know. I have some questions. You
Yeah,
give me the space to have that conversation, and I'll tell you like, yeah, I'm down right now, or I don't feel like answering those questions right now. And then we'll talk about other things. And then I'll be like, okay, I'm ready for your dumb white question.
yeah.
Like, and
you have
then
you have saved me from so many minefields. It's like, I'm a stupid white dude. Like, I'm trying to do better, but part of doing better is fucking up. And my I don't know how this goes elsewhere in the world, but at least here in the United States, people have a bad relationship with failure.
Absolutely
Failure
true.
failure and making mistakes are a natural part of getting better. And a lot about our society is like, do not fail, be perfect. A failure is going to last a long time. And like, I remember thinking about getting that impression from the way grading worked in school. It's like, man, I did bad on this one test, and now I'm going to have to struggle for everything for the rest of the semester, because I was one of those fools who thought grades mattered a whole lot. But
oh, do you remember like in school things being on a permanent record?
I never got told permanent record in serious talk, but like there was still a whole lot of like, hey, this is going to reflect on you going forward. And like, yeah, it was all bullshit, but it like that approach that we in the West have is incorrect. It's wrong, and it's setting us up for misery. You're not the only non-white, not straight person I've talked to. Like, and so in that phase, it's like, crap, I just lost my train of thought entirely. I'm sorry.
You're good, but like, it's just like, a lot of us really appreciate when folks come to us and be like, hey, I have a question. When you have the energy, I would love if you could help me out with this, because we want that gentle approach. We want the questions. We want that rather than just straight up assumptions and rolling with it and then getting mad when we're like, hey, let's don't. And then, just ask your questions in a way that opens up the conversation and opens up I don't have the energy right now, but I'd love to answer it when I do. Or yeah. And like, and then opens up the opportunity for, well, no, you're wrong about that. And here's why that's harmful. And for you to feel your feelings, but also not make the feelings the person's fault that's calling you out on your shit. Like, because
That's it.
That's the most
you can
important
be
part right there.
called to the table gently. You can be called out and called in. That's something that's important.
I remember what I lost my train of thought on there. What I was going to say is, most people that I have met who are not some form of, that are not the cishet white dudes, what I have experienced is that most folks from less privileged groups can usually tell when somebody's coming in with good intentions and when someone's coming in with shitty intentions. Like,
Oh, absolutely. We know.
yeah, like there's a common misconception of, less privileged folks being very easy to offend and all that. And like, that's not what I've experienced. What I've experienced is that most folks, and I'm a white guy, so I don't have this from firsthand. This is just my observation, but seems like most folks can tell when it's a matter of ignorance and when it's a matter of malice.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah. So I guess the conclusion for that thread is don't be afraid of making mistakes. Part of being an ally is fucking up and then improving.
Yeah.
And definitely
Exactly.
don't fuck up and then double down and go the other direction, because that's much worse. That is not the answer.
Yes. That is not the way.
Yeah, that's the point at which I start going, okay, you're an asshole. Yeah, I guess the conclusion of that thought is don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Not at all, because again, most people are going to, as long as don't double down, don't get into that space of reactivity.
Yeah.
Or in the event that you do, pull it back, apologize, recognize that you've reacted, and ask for what can I do to make amends, then everything will be okay. It's all about that recognition. It's all about that self accountability. That's a big issue, is that a lot of folks don't have that self accountability.
Very few people in privileged positions have the incentive to get outside of their own box. And so whenever they're forcibly shown, or not forcibly, but maybe just shown against their will that they are in a box and that their box has certain parameters, it's usually a very unpleasant experience for them. And that's kind of what can lead to that sort of doubling down and reactivity. And nobody likes to be shown their own sort of shortcomings and dark sides, but it's an important thing for people to experience in order to grow and in order to become better as people. I don't understand this huge sort of epidemic in the United States especially, but in the West in general, with people being wrong and then just deciding that they're right and everybody else is wrong about something. I don't understand how that math works out in their head. It is completely counterintuitive to like becoming a smarter, more well-rounded, and more kind and more content and peaceful person. The bigger someone's world is, the more peaceful and content they are, and the more intelligent and cultured they are. And so I don't understand why there's this like resistance to becoming that way.
In spirituality, in a lot of spiritual circles, we call it the dark night of the soul, because it feels almost like, in a way, a death. It feels like a death of what you know. It feels like a death of a former self, and it can be like a great mourning. It feels like, just, I've been through a few, so I can attest to it feeling like I have lost parts of myself, everything that I've known. It's scary. It very much feels like experiencing a great grief of something or someone that I knew that I can never get back. And then coming out of it, it's great, but going through it, it's quite painful.
Mm-hmm.
And
I can see
that, when you're going through it, no one quite wants it, but it is very necessary. It is, you ultimately do want it. And the thing is, well, we're scared of what we don't really understand. And a lot of folks are resistant to, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess like when you describe a dark night of the soul, it's kind of vague because you basically just say what I just said, which is like it's like a death, and people are like, oh, well, I don't want that, and it's like, well, it's hard to explain because everyone's is different,
Yeah.
and it's, I mean, I'm literally shrugging right now and shaking my head. I'm like, I don't know how to tell you what yours is going to be like because everyone's is a little different.
It seems like the theme is great change of some kind, and people are usually resistant
It
and
is.
scared of great change.
It
And
is. It's very much that.
I think all three of us have some background in tarot reading. It's like, it's one of the reasons that the death card and the tower cards are
Mhm.
often considered bad cards. Like the tower is things are going to change, and death is something is going to end. And here in the United States, we have this, or well, probably everywhere really, but in the United States especially, we have this idea of perfection, of things being at the top, of things reaching its end, and of things being ideal. And that is not possible in a world that changes as much as this one does. Like
Mhm.
think that state they're looking for is not possible. And like it makes sense that this would cause, emotional distress like a death. It's the death of a worldview. When I was just, when I first got to college and started, meeting more than one non-white person at a time and started like learning the actual history of the United States, that was a death. Like I
Mhm.
once upon a time I was a staunch capitalist. I thought it was a great idea that if competition would actually make things better, and then I start actually looking at what it's resulted, and it's like I was wrong. Everything I thought I knew was wrong. And like you said, that sucks. Like that's the dark night of the soul. You've got to go through, like, your worldview is shattered. So you have to go make a new one. And a lot of people just don't have it in them to make a new one.
Yeah, because the thing is like when you come out of a dark night of the soul, you're new again and you're
Yep.
kind of squishy and soft, and you're not, you don't have like a shell around you. You're not protected like you once were. So you're malleable.
Yeah. There's a video game line that I like that kind of captures that essence. It's from Path of Exile, and it is a line that is no longer in the game, but used to be the introduction to the game's end game. So, before you're getting into the end game, you have been wrecking everything, you killed the final boss, you're feeling like a badass, and then somebody says, here's the end game. It will return you to a state of glorious helplessness. And that seems like what's going on here. It's like you got through one layer and then realize, oh, that layer didn't even matter. Here we are again. You're back in this vulnerable place. And after, when you've been safe and get back into that spot, that's a terrifying situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, and of course I think about like butterflies. I think about how with a caterpillar, they start out so vulnerable as tiny itty bitty little caterpillars, and then they get huge, they get massive, right, in a
Mm-hmm.
very short amount of time. And then they turn into chrysalis. And in the chrysalis, they completely break down into just effluence, into
Right.
goo.
It's goo.
And that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like when you have your whole world change, when you have your whole world challenged, everything that you know. Yeah, it's important to just go through that, to accept that that's what's going to happen when you have everything you know, everything that you keeps you safe, challenged. Because the thing is that keep you safe are what put other people in detriment.
Right. That safety at the cost of others is unacceptable.
It is. It really, really is. And you can use those things. That's why we say use your privilege. And that's why I said earlier, me being light skinned, me being perceived as a cis woman, I can use that I can play on the fact that I've got these connections through my dad. He was a I hesitate to say this, but I will. He was a police officer.
Right.
I'm fully ACAB, but he was a police officer, and I will use that privilege to, I'll be like, well, if I have to talk to a cop, I'll be like, yeah, my dad was a cop, and da 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 da.
That'll get them to listen to you more. Like, based on what little experience with police I've had, like, yeah, they'll absolutely go like, oh, like, she's in the fold, or he's in the fold, or whatever
No, and
the situation
they will
is.
say she, and I will fully go into she mode and be like, oh yeah, my dad was a cop, I understand what y'all go through, thank you, blah 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 blah. I will fully go into that mode if it means protecting others,
Yeah, they're
because
not.
that is my privilege. They don't know better.
Yeah, they're going to use their privilege. We might as well do the same.
And that's the thing, is that's what people don't understand, is that I am putting myself in danger, because if these people actually knew who I was,
That'd be bad.
that'd be a bit bad.
Yeah, a little bit.
Pretty dangerous.
They'd be a bit bad. And especially if they actually understood that I am not white, I am very light-skinned Afro-Indigenous. I'm putting myself at risk, but I'm using what privilege I have and doing what I need to do to keep others safe. And that's just my role. And other people can do the same thing. And I actually had a situation in my old town where there was a peaceful BLM protest, and it got violent because people from a neighboring town came and did a counter protest saying BLM does not in fact matter. And they became violent with the BLM protester, party, and someone's neck actually got dislocated.
Oh shit.
Yeah,
That's
and
real
which was, I
violent.
didn't. Yes, that is violence. I did not know that was actually physically possible. And someone in the town's like Facebook group, someone who is also Black, said, hey, this is why the few of us in the town who are people of color don't feel safe, because none of y'all showed up, because like we don't feel safe actually being the ones out there protesting. And I chimed in and I said, yeah, I don't feel safe leaving my house. And so I actually got messages in my inbox saying, if you need someone, if you want to go protest, we will create a human shield for you. If you need someone to go to the grocery store with you or for you, we will do it. And it was actually shocking. I've never had people say that they would do these things for me. And that was allyship.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced that before or since. And this was at the height of all of that during 2020 2021. It hurt my heart quite a bit, but it was needed. And that was when I realized that I will take no less from other people. And I think I need to see more of that in folks. So circling way back, all of this with the costumes and the gaining profit from people making dream catchers or puppets or any kind of gain from cultures that are not your own, and someone approaches you and says, hey, that's not cool, you need to realize that when we try to sell our own culture in a way, we make them properly and try to gain profit, what we get, and I can say this as having experienced it, oh, but those are spiritual items, and you can't make money off of spiritual things, that's not right. Or oh, that's too much money, you're asking for too much for that labor. Or, oh, I saw somebody else selling it for less. Or I get a lot of, being that I'm a professional tarot reader, I can't charge as much as I've seen white folks charging. I've seen white folks charge hundreds of dollars for maybe an hour, not even a full hour reading, whereas I could never get away with that.
Yeah.
And I've seen people charge hundreds of dollars for a little crochet poppet, which I could never do for multiple reasons. And it's, again, this privilege, and it's beyond rude, it's beyond disgusting, it's beyond anything. And it's just people are doing this, and still we try to be gentle, because if we're not gentle, then it's just going to feed into the bias of
Right.
the racist bias of, oh, these people are so rude, and we have to be so PC these days, and blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard all those mumblings too. It's just I've heard it, from the point of view of somebody, thinking, "Oh, this guy's white. He's in on the joke or whatever." And it's like, that's not how it is. But tying it all back to where we started, as you're listening to, as we post this, rather, it's Friday the 13th. It's October. It's time for Halloween. And so let's just have a good spoopy season and actually think about your costumes. Don't steal it from other people.
Thank you, Ambrose, for coming on and for sharing as much as you did and your experience and everything. We really appreciated it. And I think that everybody will enjoy hearing the stories and hearing the information you've shared.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, this was great. If you want to come back and talk about something else sometime, we are perfectly happy to do another one, because like I said, this was great.
Totally open invitation.
I would love to. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey folks, this is Docs speaking after the recording. We forgot to plug Ambrose's social media, so you can find him on Instagram and Facebook under the name Sweet Teeth Bite Harder. You can also email him at sweetteethbiteharder@gmail.com. All one word, no dots or underscores. Also, you can find a link to Ambrose's Ko-fi in the description. Listeners, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. Hope you can take this information and use it to grow.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next time.